Okay, it's a bit breezy this morning. Here's a clue to round number 2. These pressures may challenge any preconceived notions. Alright, I'm going to get the chronograph out there and I'll try to edit the wind noise as best as I can. 1688. 1655. 1647. You guys are gonna laugh. I gotta go get the camera and show you this. See that? 2247. I'm gonna retake that. That's not an accurate number. I'm sure that that's probably the heat from the day messing with these numbers. I'm gonna go pull this back, get it out of the sun for a few minutes and retake that shot. So while the breeze has slowed down just a little bit, again, 80 grains by weight. By volume, it's about 95. So while we wait for this to cool down, enjoy the filler. I have another filler coming up when I clean out the gun. It's rather lengthy. You can scroll through it if you want. If you want to watch it, please enjoy. So this next piece of filler is dedicated to the Learn How to Read Your Patches Foundation. Been reading muzzleloader magazines for over 3 decades, and there's several articles in there teaching folks how to read their patches to kind of get a feel for what your muzzleloaders are doing. At this point, since we're all experimenting with homemade gunpowder, I think those generalization of rules can now be thrown out the window. What I have here is the patches that I picked up from round 1 and round 2. And I'm not telling you which one is going to be which because it'll give you too much of a clue, I think. But I do know specifically which patches were shot in each round because I did pick them up, but more precisely, in one of the rounds, I shot 2 of these clear, non-pillow ticking patches. Now they're all 20 thousandths. I'm going to try to get these spread out here before the wind, the breeze, blows them off the table like they're trying to do now. But I want you guys to kind of like look at how clean those are. Okay. Now I'm going to open up the other ones, and I know what round and what powder was burnt with these patches, and you can see several of them have pretty much disintegrated. And I will tell you, I'm at 15 yards from my shooting bench to the berm, and several of the patches did make their way all the way to the berm. Not the ones that are shredded like this, but this white one made its way all the way to the berm, and one of these other ones did also. But the other ones fell just short of the berm. So you guys try to figure this out for yourself. Which ones belong to which day, which round, and perhaps it might give you a clue as to what charcoal I was using. And I will note right here that all the rendezvous that I've been at, I tend to look at the ground to look at patches. And here again, this comes from several decades of articles, Muzzleloader magazine, and I have noted over the years that several patches that I've noticed on the ground were burnt like this and shredded. And because I know who's shooting what, because I ask a lot of questions as to the color and the thicknesses of their patches, when I see a patch like this, I try to find out whose patch it is and what kind of gunpowder they're shooting. And 9 times out of 10, those friends are telling me they're shooting 777. So that might give you a clue. Back to the shooting range. $16.57. It's a little more like it. I've got the chronograph back here to keep it in the shade while I reload. Got one more shot to take, then I'm going to go clean the gun. Enjoy the filler. $16.67. So for this next piece of filler, you might want to pour your favorite beverage. I might get a little long-winded in this one because I have a story to tell, and I'm going to kind of give you guys a little bit of timeline into myself and my experiences being a buckskinner, a historical reenactment. I really don't like that phrase because when we go to these mountain man rendezvous, we're not really reenacting anything. But I do like the terminology experimental archaeologist. And let me just qualify that real quick. An archaeologist, as we should all know, will dig something up and then he'll give you his interpretation of what this item was used for based on previous knowledge. Whereas an experimental archaeologist will find something and then they'll recreate it and then they'll see how the item precisely works through the use. And that's what I think a lot of us buckskinners are. We're actually that type of archaeologist, an experimental archaeologist, because you'll go to a trader, such as myself, and you'll find flint and steel. Well, you already know what that item is, but you have to experiment with it before you fully understand the functionality of it. For instance, you don't specifically need flint to draw a spark. Quartz will do it. A sandstone will do it. Something that has a high silica content can be used in making your flint and steel work to start a fire. And then of course the more you learn about all the mechanics of starting fires, you'll need like maybe jute twine. If you've lived in the Southwest, you can get to the century cactus that's died, scrape out that pithy stuff, and that'll catch a spark and start a fire with. When I lived up in northern Wisconsin, you could find certain mushrooms that grow out the side of trees. If you break them open and they have like a wood type pithy grain to it, you can take and char that and carry that in your fire starting kit, and that'll also aid you in starting fires because that stuff when charred does catch a spark. So it's really been encouraging for me to see so many new ones learning and applying these skills, and especially since we have YouTube now, there's a much more broader audience that can find their way to it and maybe find the romance that's all involved with that. And I say that because when I first started doing this over 3 decades ago, and I went in primarily as a trader, the one thing that I heard a lot from traders was, there's no new blood, there's no new blood. I can't make any money, I can't make any money. I gotta quit because I'm not making any money. So for a lot of those people back then, their whole mission about doing any of this stuff was primarily concerned and centered around making money. But I do have to acknowledge, I just watched a video that Ethan from the channel I Love Muzzleloading, he just put up a video of a weekend event that he just attended to, and I saw no young people in that video at all. It was just primarily older people. And I think, personally, a lot of that's attributed to Hollywood and what Hollywood puts out for, you know, features. For instance, what grabbed me way back when was the fact that Hollywood put out this movie. When this movie came out, of course, my mother idolized Robert Redford, which, you know, at the time, most women in America did. She just had to go out and see Jeremiah Johnson, and she drug her 2 boys along with her. And that was my influence. I knew then, somehow, some way, I wanted my life to not be like that, but to use those same type of skills, such as trapping, hunting, knowing the difference between, you know, a 30 caliber gun, a 50 caliber Hawken, wearing a fur hat, and, you know, starting fires with flint and steel, but being smart enough to recognize you don't want to start a fire underneath a branch that's holding a whole bunch of snow. We all know how that turned out, don't we? But when I finally got to the point to where I could adjust things in my life to go to Mountain Man Rendezvous, I had already been shooting black powder guns, and as I've mentioned on this channel before, I actually built my first cap and ball revolver when I was 18 out of a kit, 1858 Remington. But over the years, I've done a lot of study, done a lot of research, and I've been able to walk through a lot of the tall tales. I don't want to call them bullshit. Some people are proficient at being a bullshit artist, especially at a rendezvous camp. But you have to kind of learn and walk your way through these things and then apply what fits you the best. What you want to emulate as a buckskinner or as a experimental archaeologist. Okay? Now, one of the first items that I got my hands on at a rendezvous was this booklet, 1837 Sketchbook of the Western Fur Trade by Rex Allen Norman. And what Rex Allen Norman did was examine the artwork of Alfred Jacob Miller. Alfred Jacob Miller was there personally. And the book is full of sketches of what he observed personally from the men that were involved the fur trade era. And if you're just getting new to this, you're going to hear sometimes ad nauseum, that's not period correct. That's not period correct. Your gun's not right for your dress. I've heard that a lot. But because I've taken the time to examine first-hand accounts, whether that be in museums, looking at pieces in museums, and or reading books of first-hand accounts, first-hand journals and things like that, I have learned to identify when I'm absolutely being bullshitted. But one thing that I hold near and dear about this booklet is the dedication to. And as you can see and read, it's dedicated to the Powderhorn clan of Arizona and the less miserables primitives. And a special thanks to Vic Barking Dog Barkin. I've slept once or twice since then, but if I'm not mistaken and memory serves me correctly, this is the gentleman he's referring to. I've rendezvoused with these guys when I was first learning to be a buckskinner. I learned a lot from these people, and in particular from the Powderhorn clan. Okay? And with that being said and stated, we all know that when you go to rendezvous, everybody wants to have a collection of medallions. And this is just a small sampling of the medallions that I've collected over the years rendezvousing. But there's one that pertains to my storytelling in this filler piece. You see this medallion right here? Let me read it to you if you couldn't read it. It's the 50th anniversary of the Powderhorn clan from 1984 to 1989. What made that medallion special to me is this. When I was gifted this medallion, I was told by the person gifting it to me that you had to be a member of the Powderhorn clan to have that medallion. I will let that speak for itself, because I don't join groups and I don't join clubs. I'll let that rest right there. Now, over the years, as I've explained, I've heard so many times, that's not period correct, that's not period correct. Okay? If you ever get a hold of this book by Rex Allen Norman, you have to remember a thing or two. Not too many years ago, maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20. Like I said, I've slept since then. I think it was A&E or the History Channel came out with a documentary in the history of the mountain men. And in that documentary, they interviewed Rex Allen Norman. And Rex Allen Norman, over the years, has written articles for Muzzleloader magazine. And if you ever come across that documentary, it's a very good documentary with one exception that I found critical. Because when they interviewed Rex Allen Norman said mountain men did not wear fur hats. They always wore a wide brim hat, and that's why the Indians always, whenever they did this, they knew they were talking about the white man with the wide brim hat. The very next scene, they talked to another feller who had some trade goods on a blanket, and guess what he featured? A fur hat. So you kind of have to pay real close attention to your studies and your research, is just simply because when you talk about the mountain man era and the fur trapping era, you actually had two different type of trappers. You had the trapper that was attached to a trapping brigade, such as the ones that Alfred Jacob Miller drew, and you had the free trapper. Now the free trapper was at more liberty to do what he wanted with the furs that he trapped himself, perhaps making a fur hat in the dead of winter. I'll let you guys ponder that yourself. Okay, now one of the other things that I've noted, because I got kind of tired of hearing, that's not period correct, that's not period correct. There's a sketch right there of a bullet pouch. And if you look at that, that very much looks like pillow ticking. I'm going to read what Rex Allen Norman wrote. A fascinating haversack type badge shown in one of the versions of The Trapper's Bride, tanned gray with narrow red stripes. Heavy ticking? Okay. Even as good as this guy looks, everybody might think he's 100% period correct. But where's his ticking bag? If you focus on one thing, and make that one thing be your ideology to period correct, then you might want to get a book such as this and read further about how some of the bags were of heavy leather. Okay, and I do recognize that today when we go to Mountain Man rendezvous, and myself included, I'm not excluding myself, I prefer a leather bag as opposed to pillow ticking. But that's the difference between looking at a free trapper and a trapper with a trapping brigade. For instance, if you're being chased by some hostiles, would you rather lose this or something that you took time to brain tan and then make a pouch out of? From the trapping brigade and those that were financing them, having a cloth ticking bag was very financially beneficial to them. Because if you lost this, you're not out all that much money as opposed to, say, a beaver pelt bag. Now, over the years, I have seen period correct, how can I phrase this? A buffalo pouch that was made during that time period. And that buffalo bullet pouch was authenticated to be coming from that time period. So I've seen a lot over the years. So I guess the point of this is that if you're new to this, before somebody tells you, well, that gun's not period correct, and we already know what I said about the gentleman dressed in the 1700s shooting a Hawkins-style gun with fiber optic sights. We all know that's not period correct. But what I've also seen over the years is that people that tend to hear people criticize the way they look, the way how they do things by period correct, tend to leave this sport, this type of recreation. And I've been one to never let that happen to, because I've done the study, I've done the research, and things like that as it pertains to the mountain man fur trade era. So if you hear a lot of people saying, that's not period correct, well, what kind of gun do I need to get? Do I got to have this? What's the difference between, the French fusee and the English fusee? Do your study, do your research, and then pick the firearm that suits best what you want to do. But that's not to put too fine of a point on it, because if, like during the fur trade era, the mountain man era, let's just say you were being chased by the hostiles and you had to drop your bag, you had to drop your gun, and your horse gets shot out from underneath you, you tumble to the ground and you make it to the woods, and you're walking around trying to get back to your main camp, and you come across a buckskin or two that have been ambushed and killed. What would you do if some of the items were still there? You'd take them, and then you would reuse them. So you have to keep a lot of that stuff in mind when people are saying, well, your outfit isn't perfectly correct, and you need to come up with a story saying, I might recognize that, but I lost my goods and I had to walk back to camp, and I came across a couple of scout Native Americans, and I ambushed them and I got their rifle, or I stole their rifles at night while they were sleeping. You've got to be able to come up and bullshit the bullshit artist, I guess is what I'm getting at. And in a lot of ways, I've learned that technique. So enough of my rambling. Let's get back out and get some more numbers if these numbers really matter to people. 16, 16. 15, 60. And just an added note, I am bringing the chronograph back with me, put it in the shade as I am loading the gun. It's getting pretty hot right now, and I will tell you, even in my shop, the relative humidity is at 22%, if that really matters. $16.47. $15.83. So just so that everybody can see, it's 80 grains by weight, but this time it's just a little bit higher in the flask. Well, it says 1907. Should I keep it or should I reshoot it? I think I'm gonna just reshoot it. Well, as you guys can see, 1893. I guess I'm just gonna keep it, work with that number. The only thing that I can attribute the last two shots to is maybe I'm seating my ball on the powder charge just a little bit harder than I did the previous shots. So as most of you know now, I got a gun to go clean, equipment to put away, and run back to the shop, and we'll just look at these numbers real quick. Well, the winds died down just a little bit more, but I found something a little bit interesting and intriguing with this particular round, because I picked up the patches from round 2 and I showed everybody as a filler how clean they actually were. And in between round 1 and round 2 cleaning my rifle in this particular round, I went to pick up some of the patches and I noticed they were a little bit more dirtier. Now now just so that you'll know, in this particular round all my gunpowder was juniper, okay? But I won't tell you what's what until I drop a clue until the very end. But with those patches being a little bit more dirtier, I get to thinking about something. Now, when I'm at a rendezvous, I tend to suck the water, or at least the spit, out of the patch before I put it down my barrel. In round 1, I wasn't cognitive of that. And I think because of that, I was putting a more moistened patch down that barrel, pushing all of that fouling onto the patch because the patches were more dirty. And I've thrown them away since then. Just have to trust me on that. But when I get to round 2, I was very conscious about one of my patches. And I grabbed a white patch and I sucked the moisture out of it and I found the patch. And you can see how clean that patch is because I've sucked most of the spit out of it. And I got to be honest with you guys, when I watch videos when there's wind coming through the microphone, I immediately shut it off. So I'm cognitive about how irritating some of that is. So here's my excuse. I was rushing through the loading process because some of the loading process I still had the camera on. So that's probably what that's what I'm going to attribute it to. You can attribute it to anything you like, but for me, I can tell you specifically with this white patch, I was very cognitive of sucking the moisture out of it because I was conscious about how irritating it is to listen to wind coming through a microphone. And I wanted to get round 3 done because I'm leaving for the Santa Fe Trail Rendezvous like lickety-split. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys these numbers just simply because on both rounds I had to do a redo and I kind of wanted to see what those numbers were going to end up being since I had 6 numbers to work with, okay? But the 5 numbers, including the redo, okay, with the first round, I got an average of 1662.8. with a spread of 41. The next 5 round balls, excluding that 1907 and putting in the 1893, I got an average speed of, or velocity of, 1659.8 with a spread of 333. That's quite a bit of difference, but I found this interesting. If you factor in all 6 numbers, with the first round, I get an average of 1760.16 with a spread of 600. With the second round, factoring in all 6 numbers, I get an average of 1701 with a spread of 347. You guys can write those numbers down and then you can do the math all you want, because with the 5 numbers, the first round, the average was 1662, basically with a spread of 41. The other round, with the 5 numbers, was 1659 with a spread of 333. I laugh and I joke. And as I've said before, these numbers really don't mean anything to me, because there's too much variables in all of this. And I say that just simply because with these numbers in your mind, how many of you are cognitive of the Coriolis effect? Now granted, I'm shooting only at 15 yards, but if I have to go out to 100, 150 yards or even 200 yards, even with a high-powered rifle, how many of you are really cognitive of the Coriolis effect? And if you don't know what that is specifically, and some of you just went, dang, because all my life of shooting, and my dad drilled this into my head at a young age. You have to know what direction you're shooting in order to be a more proficient shooter, especially at long distance here. My mouth's a little dry. So all my life shooting, I've always been cognitive of, am I shooting north and south, east or west? Because if you're shooting north and south and the earth is rotating east to west, at a long distance, you're going to miss your target if you're not making that adjustment. Now, most of us already know and are familiar with, if you're shooting long distance, you need to aim up just a little bit. But how does that play into the spreads of your numbers? How does that play into your velocities? See, that's why for me, these numbers mean nothing if you're not cognitive of which direction you're shooting. So thanks for watching this video and indulging me. And I hope that you guys can take something away from this. In particular, you guys that are just, getting into the whole muzzleloader shooting and things like this. Welcome aboard. And I look forward to your comments. And I want everybody to have a great week, because I know I am. I'm going to rendezvous. Bye.